I say to my team, if you wake up and you feel like you don't want to be here, you should go, and I'll support you getting a job somewhere else. Not because I don't want you to stay, but you've got to spend your time doing things you love. I tell my team all the time that their family comes first, way ahead of work. If there's a sick child, if there's an engagement, a wedding, a sick mum or whatever, that takes priority. Immediately, go and do that. Don't even think about work. And try and share as much of what you feel emotionally with the company. It's just be the same person you are with your friends as you are at work. And you need leaders in your company that do that too, so that people feel comfortable doing it. And I think that's been my main progression over the last 20 years, is to trust the team and trust myself to share these things, and trust that they'll be received in a way that's kind of gentle and compassionate. And that's what I think makes a better company.
Hey friends, welcome to the Changing Work Podcast. We are so glad you're here.
My name is Nick.
And I'm Scott.
And this is the podcast where we talk about changing work from the inside out.
So if you're into making the workplace and the world a better experience via conscious business practices, stick around. This is for you. Christopher, how are you?
Hello, Scott. I'm well. How are you?
Very good. So glad you could join us. I'll give a little bio and then we'll jump into it. So people have some background on who you are. So Christopher Plowman is the CEO and co-owner of Insight Timer, the world's largest well-being community. And he spends most of his time thinking about how Insight Timer can help people build happier and healthier lives, both at home and at work. That's pretty cool. And so here's something else I read, is that you believe that attraction beats promotion every time. And in the last 8 years, without spending a single cent on advertising, transformed Insight Timer from a basic meditation timer to a community of 27 million people, 85,000 companies, 20,000 teachers. So, and thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's very early for you. It's 2:30 in Paris for me. It's nice to be here. I'm looking at the screen and it says how to be a conscious leader. And it's making me nervous or anxious because I don't consider myself a conscious leader. And I hate labels of gurus, and you bring someone on and you say this person is conscious, and I get uncomfortable with the labeling. But if I can talk about my experiences today, then I'm happy to do so.
That's fair. We won't treat you as the sage on the stage. Yeah. How about the guide on the side? How about that?
I'm always wary of people on stages. I always say beware the guru. All I can do is share my experiences. It's nice to be here, Scott. Thank you for having me.
It's an admirable trait. How about this? How about let's start with something before we jump into the heady or the mental questions. How about this? What's one thing that makes your heart light up?
My kids.
Yeah, cool. You want to say anything more?
Did you want more? Honestly, I'm finding life at the moment really challenging. I've got lots of things going on, and there's been a few personal things that have happened recently, which have been really challenging. And I think I was saying to my son just yesterday, life's kind of cycles. There are 7-year cycles and daily cycles and circadian rhythms and the sunrise and the sunset. And at the moment, I feel like I'm having a challenging cycle. I find when challenging things happen, they often tend to happen all at once. And if I listed all of the challenges I had right now, it's kind of a bit overwhelming. And one thing that does ground me and kind of stills me and makes me sort of enjoy the present moment is talking to my son and my daughter and my new daughter. So there you go. It's kind of just the simple moments, the uncomplicated moments in my life that make my heart light up, not the complex ones.
Right. We spend so much of our time thinking about those challenges, but it's really the heart connections that make life worth living. And so, well done to stay in that space or try to stay in that space. Okay. I have a question. I saw one of my favorite posts on LinkedIn in the last 3 or 4 months was from you. You were introducing your new CMO, Melissa, and basically, hey, here's our new chief marketing officer. She's going to be great. I'll paraphrase, But I've basically given her the hardest job in the world because we don't do promotion. We only do attraction. Could you talk more about that and what that means?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big decision even to employ a chief marketing officer. Just the whole, even the title gives me shivers. We've never spent any time or money at Insight Timer trying to grow. We've always just tried to build something that endures and that's sustainable and that supports. That's the only thing we've ever focused on. And we only even focused on revenue about a year and a half ago. We are very fortunate to have great investors who kind of understand that if you build a community, it takes time, and that takes investments and patience. And so the idea that we then go out and kind of try and expand through artificial growth, which is attraction, makes me anxious, because what we know is that when you advertise, you dress yourself up, you put on your best face, and usually in one form or another, you make promises or commitments that aren't always completely authentic. And then when someone arrives, you have to maintain that promise. What I like about Insight Timer is we meet you where you are. We don't promise to be anything because we don't advertise. You rock up in whatever conscious state you're in, whatever stage, whatever cycle you're in, and we meet you there. And we say, hey, well, you know, you found us. This is who we are. We didn't promise anything. This is what we have to offer. And if you'd like to stay, you're welcome to stay. It's free. If you'd like to pay us, we'd love you to do that too, because we need some money to fund everything. But 99% of what we offer is free. And what we know is that combination of platform, of products, means that we have, and now I'm going to start talking like a business owner, not a conscious leader, is that we have 6 or 7 times higher retention than Headspace or Calm. You know, other platforms that offer similar things, you are 6 or 7 times more likely to maintain a well-being practice if you sign up to Insight Timer than you are if you sign up to other platforms. And that's what I mean by attraction beats promotion. It's not that you will necessarily be bigger than other platforms. We all know that those other platforms currently are much bigger in terms of number of users. But over the long term, over the long arc of kind of trying to address well-being, which is a commitment and takes time, attraction is much better than promotion. And that's what I mean, which is that you build a platform that actually helps people. We might not make as much money as those companies. Long term, I think we'll make more. It'll be smaller amounts from fewer people, but as a collective volume, it'll be greater, because we hope to build a platform that has 1 billion people kind of working on these issues. And when you advertise, you kind of say silly things to get attention, and you say things that aren't always true. You become disingenuous, usually. So that's what I mean.
I think it's fascinating. And you mentioned that it works because you have great investors. It works because of the type of platform you are. What are the lessons, if you were advising any other company, a manufacturing company, tech company, any other company that isn't a meditation app, what are the lessons from this idea that anyone could take with them?
I think this is going to annoy you, Scott, because we have an audience. I don't know what I would say to other companies. If you're selling fridges or cars or insurance policies, first of all, I don't understand the advertising space. This is why I brought Melissa on, right? And you said Melissa's got a hard job. I think she has a very hard job, because she comes to me with ideas and I say, no, I'm not going to do that, because that's not, you know. So we have this wonderful 2-hour meeting every Tuesday, Melissa and I, about ideas, and we're trying to work our way through how we promote ourselves without promoting ourselves, if you like. What lessons have I learned from Insight Timer that I would apply to other industries? I do know that we believe deeply that generosity is circular, and I say this to my kids the whole time. I didn't know this as a younger Christopher. I was quite combative and various other things, but what I know now is I do believe that generosity, giving, is a a reciprocating action as well. The more you give, the more you will receive. And so I would suggest actually that most companies today, greed's become a primary fundamental building block of, like, fiduciary duty. For me, there's no more toxic term than fiduciary duty, because it sort of neglects all of our other responsibilities to each other and the planet and the environment. Fiduciary duty says you have one obligation only, just to take care of your shareholders, at the expense of everything else. It shouldn't exist. It should be banned, this concept. But it's easy for me to say, Scott, that generosity is circular, and that you can take time to build a company, because I have very generous investors who believe in the conscious objectives of Insight Timer and who willingly invest in our platform and pay the bills while we're trying to find a profitable model. And that's why I'm very, very nervous about giving other people advice, because it seems in itself, it's even worse than the How to Be a Conscious Leader label you had down here, because there are other challenges that businesses face where profitability, and don't get me wrong, my investors expect a profitable platform. I think we will be profitable this year. But I don't want to kind of be the sage on stage that tells other people how to run their businesses. Sorry.
Christopher, you are super humble. I appreciate you.
No, I'm not that either. So
you're not that either? Okay.
I just don't know. And,
yeah.
I also, there's another term I don't like at the moment running around for the last 12 months, is imposter syndrome. I don't like that term either. But the truth is, and this is not faux humility, but the truth is I just bought a meditation app with my brother 10 years ago, and we wanted to build something, and it's turned into something much bigger than I ever anticipated. That's partially because of the decisions that I've made with the board and with my executive team, but it's also partially luck. It's also partially, I think we're in the right spot at the right time. The planet needed something like this. And we're also financially not a successful business yet, right? Like, we're not wildly profitable, and we have many, many challenges. So, yeah, it's not that I'm being humble. I just simply don't know the answer to your question.
Well, I might offer as an observer what I'm learning by watching you. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
So
analyze me.
What I appreciate about this way that you're doing business is that you're, in my understanding of it, which means that's my reality of it, that you're trying to focus on providing value instead of selling. And if every company in the world focused on providing value first and sales, later, it seems like that would be a recipe for, success, or at least more value over time.
I think you've got net extractors and net contributors. And I think that usually small companies start out trying to offer something of value. And I think I've built a model at Insight Time that allows us to continue contributing, because we have this model where generosity is circular. I think you're right. I think a lot of companies end up extracting more than they contribute. They extract resources, they extract profits. I'm a huge capitalist, don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-capitalism, but I think what happens is you get companies that end up becoming so big and so greedy that they end up extracting more than they put back. And that is a problem. And I think, especially in tech, by the way, because nowadays tech has become so big that I think you've got the top 3 or 4 companies on the planet are worth $10 trillion. It's an inconceivable number. And I've tried to build a company that contributes more than it extracts. And I hope in doing so that it will make my investors a very successful company, and they'll share in the wealth of that company, and we'll build a big, successful, valuable company. I really do hope that. I hope Insight Time becomes $1 billion platform one day, but not at the expense of contributing and building something that's net positive for the planet.
Great. So, our title for this discussion is How to Be a Conscious Leader. And I know that you don't want to be the sage on a stage. So let's just have a discussion about what that might be, whether you are one or not. So
Well, oh, sorry. I thought you'd answer your question. Sorry. Yeah, go.
Yeah. No, thank you. So let's talk about how would we just define what does it mean to you either to build a conscious business or to be a conscious leader?
Well, so I thought about this because obviously in advance you said we're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
A great friend of mine who's also our chairman, one of our first investors, Bo Sheo, when I first met with him at his house, he asked me, he says, what is consciousness to you? And he thought I would give him some intelligent answer because I was running a meditation platform, and I said, I have no bloody idea. And no one can agree on what consciousness is, right? We can't define it. We don't know how we build it. We don't know if it's spiritual. We don't know if it's religious. We don't know if it's synthetic. We don't know if it's biological. We just don't know what it is. And so to take that and apply it to a leader or a business, I think is very, very difficult. What I've learned as I spent more time leading, I was going to say as I've become a leader, but I guess I am by default because I have a company with 80 people. And I was a very bad leader when I started. And Insight Time went through very difficult times. When we were a small company at the start, it was very exciting, lots of energy. Then we raised money. Then we tried to expand during COVID. And Insight Time was not a great place to work during COVID. You know, it was a very difficult time because I was asked to move from being someone that was trying to build something to someone who was trying to build people and careers. And I was very bad at it. And I hurt people too, unintentionally in that process. Insight Timer now has, I believe, a beautiful culture. We have an amazing team. We do surveys every 3 months, and our team loves working there. It's a really wonderful place to work, and it wasn't 5 years ago. And I think that the primary difference, and I can only talk about myself because obviously I have decided to be much more honest with the team about sharing what's going on in my life, my personal experiences, and allowing people to be themselves and to bring their personal stuff or their personal experiences to work, and not sort of, you know, the suit and tie used to be a physical presence, but also a barrier. You know, you would dress yourself up and you come to work as this professional person. And I say often to my team a couple of things. First of all, I talk to them often about 4,000 weeks. There's this calendar, the Memento Mori calendar. I don't know if you've heard about it, but if you live to 80, you've got 4,000 weeks total. If you get a calendar and you put your 4,000 weeks up on a calendar and you cross off the weeks that you've lived, which I do, you get past halfway very quickly, and you look at the remaining weeks and you think, geez, those weeks become valuable. I say to my son all the time, do what you want in life. They're your weeks. And so I say to my team, if you wake up and you feel like you don't want to be here, you should go, and I'll support you getting a job somewhere else. Not because I don't want you to stay, but you've got to spend your time doing things you love. I tell my team all the time that their family comes first, way ahead of work. If there's a sick child, if there's an engagement, a wedding, a sick mum or whatever, that takes priority immediately. Go and do that. Don't even think about work. And try and share as much of what you feel emotionally with the company. I do that sometimes. I've cried in meetings before because I'm naturally my way of releasing energy is crying. Other people get angry. Other people go quiet. For me, this just happens to be my release. And just try and kind of talk about stuff. It's not very scientific, Scott, right? It's just be the same person you are with your friends as you are at work. And you need leaders in your company that do that too, so that people feel comfortable doing that. Yeah. And I think that's been my main progression over the last 20 years, is to kind of trust the team and trust myself to share these things, and trust that they'll be received in a way that's kind of gentle and compassionate. And that's what I think makes a better company. Does that mean it's a conscious company? I don't know. There you go. There's my answer.
I appreciate it. I think you're onto something. Well, you talked about these giant tech companies, right? The top 5 or 7 tech companies having literally over $10 trillion of market cap. And I know that Insight Timer has been in a bit of a ongoing discussion with one of them. Could you share what you're up to with Apple and why it means so much to you?
Well, I'm going to be blunt. I think Apple's being greedy. And for your viewers that don't know, we have a feature on our platform that allows our community to donate their own personal money directly to the 20,000 teachers on our platform. We don't take a cut. 100% of that money goes from our meditator, from our user, straight into the bank account of the teacher. And Apple came along and said, well, we want 30% of that. And I said, well, you can't have it because it's not right. There's just no other rule for it. It's just not right. This is a donation from someone to a teacher who needs the supplemental income. We already pay you, Apple, 30% of our subscription revenue. We pay Apple about, I think, $6 million a year, 30% of our subscription revenue. This is a small sum of money that means a great deal to teachers. And Apple talks about the importance of education and health and all these sorts of things. And here they are kind of, in my opinion, grubbily trying to take money out of our teachers' pockets. And I said, no, I won't do it. And they said, well, we're going to throw you out of the App Store if you don't. So in the end, I had to concede because I had no choice. And so I kind of very publicly made a statement. I went on television on CNBC and I talked about this. And of course, nothing's happened because Apple has so much power that I have no recourse. I have complained, I have kicked and screamed, I've talked about it on television, on live television in America. And Apple's approach is to be silent about it because when you are in a position of power, silence is the best approach, right? I've got no further recourse. So that's what's going on. Apple is continuing to take a third of these donations, and I am powerless to stop it.
Let's let that sit for a little bit. Because when we talk about the difference between a conscious company or perhaps a not conscious company, decide for yourself.
Well, I've thought about this because I wondered if this was going to come up today, Scott. You said it might.
Yeah.
And we're talking about conscious leaders. And I think the challenge here is Apple doesn't exist. There's no such thing as Apple. There's a building where people who work for Apple work. There are products that Apple produces. There's a piece of paper that says Apple's incorporated. But you think the concept of Apple is ethereal. It doesn't exist. What is Apple? Apple is a series of decisions by a smaller group of people. That's all it is. And we know how Apple is constructed kind of in terms of hierarchy. It's not Apple that decides that Apple should take 30% of teachers' income. It's the people who run Apple. I don't want to name names because you all will know who we're talking about, but there are people at Apple that make this decision.
That's right.
And that's really what we should be talking about, right? Like there are people at Apple. Apple made, I think, $15 billion a year in taking fees from app developers, right? This is a very, very senior decision here, right? They're not going to get rid of this income, but it's not Apple that made the decision. There's a small group of people at Apple who are deciding that they are entitled to 30% of teachers' income. And I think we need to say that and not say that it's an Apple policy. A policy is built by the leaders of that organization. And I think it's an important distinction.
I agree. Let's talk a little bit. First of all, thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of Insight Timer teachers all around the world. I happen to be one as well. So thank you on behalf of all of us for continuing to stand up, continuing to raise the flag. But I have a question. I know one of the things that Insight Timer is doing is moving into the enterprise space and trying to help companies with their overall wellness and employee wellness. And I'm curious what you've seen over the past 2 or 3 years how things are, how things may have changed in the world of corporate wellness?
Well, I think they've changed a lot. One of the biggest shifts we're seeing is, I'm not sure if your viewers are aware of this, but when we built Insight Timer, we decided early on that we wanted content from all belief systems, all religions, secular and scientific content. We were very intentional about not sanitizing our products down to a small set of content that kind of was applicable to a very small group of people. And at the time when we did this 7 or 8 years ago, you know, people kind of not laughed, but like, well, you can't have religious content or spiritual content on an app if you want to go into companies. And now, of course, there's been a huge shift in thinking, and companies are embracing equality, they're embracing diversity. And the most important thing is that you have a mental health or a well-being platform that allows people of different races and religions and languages to be met at their level of understanding. If I'm someone who has a Catholic upbringing, or someone who's Buddhist, or someone who's secular, I want content from that platform that meets me at my level of understanding. And this is something that Insight Timer really excels in. We have 20,000 teachers. We have 250,000 teachings in 50 different languages from all different belief systems. And this is why our retention is so much higher than platforms that have very limited content. So that's the first thing. Kind of diversity is hip now, but for us, it's always been the primary fundamental building block of who we are. And the second thing is, I think a lot of companies sign very big contracts, expensive contracts with other providers during COVID. This was kind of a box that needed to be ticked. Money was kind of cheap, and lots of companies signed very expensive well-being programs with companies like Calm and Headspace. And what we're finding now is that they're really looking at these contracts now, and they're looking at return on investment, they're looking at retention, they're looking at engagement, and they're looking at other providers. These kind of big $250,000 contracts that need to be signed off by CFOs and HR managers are not necessarily the way forward. We've built an offering where you can sign up tomorrow, you can have a 30-day free trial, you can run it and play with it and get something set up instantly, and then decide if you want to go and do the paid platform or just do the free one. And this is why we now have 110,000 companies on our platform. And I don't mean we have contracts with 110,000 companies, but we have 110,000 people who set up a free workplace on Insight Timer who are using the platform. And this is a big shift too. It's like we're going to start small. We're going to get small pockets within our organization who are going to use it. And if we want to use your paid features later on, we will. But if we don't, we won't. And I think this has been a very interesting opportunity for us too. So I think diversity is a big switch. And I think lower pricing and kind of value-based pricing and slow onboarding, which are things Insight Timer offers, are also now very appealing to people that are rolling these things out.
Thank you.
That sounded like a pitch for our work platform, and it was.
Excellent. We just have a minute left. So just in one sentence, with all the things happening in the world, what's one thing that gives you hope?
Oh, mate, that's terrible to ask me that at the end of the
right.
I think the optimism of my kids. I look at all of the challenges we're facing right now, and the small group of people that are kind of running the world and making awful decisions. And I look at the optimism of my kids, and I think if we can somehow find a way to amplify that, the goodness of kids, and kind of accelerate their thinking, that gives me hope. But it's a pretty dismal state that I've got to look to them for optimism.
Yeah. Christopher Plowman, thank you so much for your time here. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. I believe you're a conscious leader, whether you do or not. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, Christopher.